Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee and the Academic Senate of the California State University System. Her research focuses on women of color in union leadership, ethnic studies, critical race theory, and Chicano studies. She has co-edited books, research publications, essays, and curriculum units. And I will now pass it to her for her presentation.
So you notice that among that list of everything, I'm not an activist or a scholar in the Indian American diaspora or personally connected to the issues that I'm learning so much about this afternoon. I do come to you not as, I always use my lens as a professor and as a member of the Chicanx community and of the discipline everywhere I go. But I think today the most important thing that I want to bring is my multinational, multiracial solidarity work in the movement for ethnic studies, right? Where I've had the privilege of working with Vivek and with Lisa, who have also been a part of this very struggle that I'm going to share with you about today. And as I was listening to the last presenter, who was that? The very last student who presented. Palash. I was driven by that because I thought that that was a very important segue into the work that we do with liberatory ethnic studies. That ethnic studies is not the teaching of ethnic peoples, right? That ethnic studies is not centered on the contributions that minoritized communities make to the U.S. And that ethnic studies is not about food, fiesta, and folklorico. Ethnic studies is liberatory. It's anti-imperialist, it's anti-colonialist, and it's the story of oppressed, marginalized communities of color in the U.S. and how they have survived a legacy of racism and oppression. And I want to say that because I think that's where we connect. And so as I listen to the presentations today, and not as an activist scholar in the work that you are all doing, I'm also a curriculum developer. And as I'm listening to that, I'm going, oh my God, that would make a great liberated ethnic studies lesson that we can use in our classroom because our students don't know about this. Right? So I invite you to use your lens as I walk through the struggle for liberatory ethnic studies. Next slide. So as we stand here, or as I stand here today, I want to share that the number of states that have adopted some form of ethnic study, and I'll explain what ethnic studies is from the academic sense in a minute, but I wanted to share with you the number of states that have adopted some form of ethnic studies legislation. There are about 22 states that have some form of ethnic studies. In many cases, it's not the ethnic studies that we have here in California, but it could be like the state of New Jersey. Every student must, is allowed to take a Latino studies class or a Black studies course. So there are at least almost 22 states that have some form of ethnic study. In the state of Massachusetts, which is not up here, this has also become an issue for those teachers teaching in Boston. The idea of teaching liberatory ethnic studies as opposed to ethnic studies. Washington State has faced the same issue that I'll be talking to you about today. Vermont has faced the same issue that I'm going to talk to you about today. So 22 states now have some form. California is the only state that has it as a graduation requirement. So every student in the state of California must take at least one ethnic studies course before they graduate from high school. If they attend a community college, they must take an ethnic studies course before they leave community college. If they attend a Cal State University system school, they must take an ethnic studies course before they graduate. And what do we mean by ethnic studies? Next. So the first argument arguing the first college of ethnic studies, and we only have 2 in the entire country, is San Francisco State University. So they're basically the ones who kind of developed, this is what it's going to mean. So ethnic studies provides academic spaces for all students to learn about the histories, cultures, and intellectual traditions of Native people in the U.S. and communities of color in the first person. What does that mean? We're not dead, right? We're not in the past, we're in the present. And so we're going to teach not only that racism exists 450 years ago, there was a legacy of enslavement, right? But we're going to teach about the oppression and marginalization of those communities today. But it's not just theories, it's not just histories, it's not just stories, it's practice, right? Ethnic studies is not ethnic studies unless it leaves the classroom. And that means that we are working to engage in dialogue with our students about theories of resistance and liberation. Our work in ethnic studies is not just to teach our stories, but to use those stories to eliminate racism and other forms of ethnic studies. So you can see why those in power aren't so thrilled that every student is going to wind up taking at least 3 courses in ethnic studies. So in California, when we started to develop the model curriculum, there were 25 people in the room who were selected from the state of California to come up to the State Department of Education to develop the ethnic studies model curriculum framework. We had no idea who was going to be in the room. We were frightened, we were nervous, because we don't trust the state of California or who they're going to put inside that room, right? We were very lucky, and that the people who were in there, mostly teachers, really understood it, but then they defined what ethnic studies was for us, right? So they said, well, it's Native American and American Indian studies, it's African American and Black studies. They said Asian American studies, and we kept adding to all the Asian Americans. Well, it can't be Asian American studies without the discussion of SWANA. It can't be Asian American studies without the discussion of Pacific Islanders. It can't be Asian American studies unless you talk about the Indian American diaspora. It can't be ethnic studies unless you talk about Palestine. Right? And so we put that up front in the curriculum. And then of course it was Chicanx and Latinx studies. Next slide. We know ethnic studies works. It's not just a feel-good curriculum that's supposed to make you feel better and where you learn about other people. It academically works, right? When you take an ethnic studies course, our students are more engaged, and then those that are low performing are even more engaged in an ethnic studies course than any other course. Well, of course, because it's the first time they see themselves in the curriculum. I'm alive, I'm living, this is my story. I've been erased. I feel really good about the fact that I'm now in the curriculum. Next slide. It's not just a feel good, they perform academically better. Right? They're more likely to go to college, they're more likely to get better grades in an ethnic studies course. Next slide. And what we care about, they gain a critical consciousness. Right? They start understanding that incidents of racism are not just happenstance. It just didn't happen that there was, somebody's father picked up by immigration yesterday and a Black youth, 15 years old, shot in the streets of LA, 1 or 2 incidents. No, they begin to realize, oh, critical consciousness. How do I change these conditions? Right? So it works. Next slide. Real quick. So, you have a good curriculum, you start getting students to be activists and start thinking about their curriculum and their work, right? And so what happens is, this is the trajectory to ethnic studies in the state of liberal California, right? This is the governor that everybody thinks is Mr. Liberal. He's always on the side of righteousness, and we know better, but that's what we're taught. So within the movement of ethnic studies, we started with one bill, AB 101, right? And AB 101 was the bill that said, okay, now every student in high school will have one course that they take. One course for 4 disciplines, right? One course that adds Black studies, the Asian American diaspora, by which I showed you how complex it was, that adds Latino and Chicano studies, that adds American Indian studies, and all of the unique and sovereign nations within American Indian studies. For 75% of the student population in California who is racialized and of color, one course, that adds to 0.7% of their academic career. If we take all 12 years and take the minutes in that course, it's 0.7% that they spend in a classroom learning about all people of color, right? But then they first said, well, you can't have it because there's no curriculum. And we could say, well, give us a bill, we'll write the curriculum, right? We come in, AB 2016, we write the curriculum. You see that group right up top with their fists in the air, really pleased and happy? We finished the curriculum, we're thrilled. Now you see the people that are kind of uncomfortable, like, I'm not sure, I'm gonna raise my fist. That's the California State Department of Education folks, right? They're not sure. We dare to include Arab American studies and a lesson plan about Palestine and a lesson plan about social movements that included a list of social movements, and one of those movements was the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, right? That set them off, and they started to push back. So that's us down there. That's us up there when we finish. That's us right there when we engaged in the fight to protect a liberatory ethnic study. Same people, a little angry.
When was that?
That was 2019. 2019. Then we start seeing movement because of the Black Lives Matter movement. And make no mistake about it, if that had not been happening at the same time, we would have never had these bills. So we have these bills, and then what I say is the litmus test in ethnic studies. Now, I'm Chicano studies. Yeah, I'm not Arab American studies. I'm not Palestinian. I'm a Chicana, born and raised here. The litmus test for defending ethnic studies is the right to teach about Palestine. That is what every single one of us in ethnic studies needs to be doing, because that's the pushback. So currently we have a bill, very onerous bill, AB 715. Are any of you aware of it? I know the two of you are. AB 715. AB 715, right, is a part of this larger movement to push back around ethnic studies. Go forward. You're going to have this. So these are all the reasons why. This was the motivation, right? There was a teacher in Northern California, I won't even say what district, and you want to know, pull me aside, I'll tell you, right? Who started to teach a lesson not in her ethnic studies course, it was her world history course, where things like this should be being taught. But this was a slide that she used in her presentation, where she was trying to get her students to understand what was happening. And she used this one slide here that talked about the creation of Israel, right? She then went into a factually accurate information on the shrinkage of Palestine beyond 1947. And then she, in a separate slide, started talking about dominant narratives, right? Now, the slides at the top are the slides she used. The verbiage at the bottom is the verbiage of JPAC, right? When they started to say, we're going to set up our legislative priorities this year for our Jewish Legislative Caucus. And they began to say, oh my God, we have to go after ethnic studies, because look, this slide up here used by this one teacher in this one classroom in this one school district ignores the race-based genocide of the Holocaust. That was their verbiage. Right? Then they go on to say, oh my God, this slide here is factually inaccurate. Remember those words, factually inaccurate, because they come back. Right? Factually inaccurate because the UN recognized side-by-side Jewish and Arab state. How dare she? Right? Talk about this. Then the third slide, they said, oh, this is terrible. This is her information about the dominant narrative, people in power. She doesn't say Jewish people in power. She says people in power, right? And in this bottom slide, they used that she was arguing that this was the portrayal of the Jewish people as puppet masters, right? Uses to motivate, to get all the folks pissed off, angry in this meeting, right? To go after ethnic studies. So what do? Next slide, they write a bill, because that's what they do best. They go into this back room and they say, we're going to develop a bill, and it's going to be called AB 1468, and it's going to be on ethnic studies. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to say that they need standards in ethnic studies, because otherwise teachers don't know what they're doing, right? We're going to de-intellect ethnic studies where they can't talk about theory, they can't use words like settler colonialism, they can't do blah, 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 and it's all in the bill, right? We're going to make sure that they don't have discussions on issues of human rights, globalism, settler colonialism, and Palestine. We're going to monitor these teachers and these students, because we're going to establish this oversight committee in the state of California. So my student goes into so-and-so's classroom and thinks so-and-so is being anti-Semitic, they're going to tell on them and they're going to report it to the state of California, and this teacher is going to be brought up on charges. Right? And then we're going to police the curriculum so that we make sure that teachers are not saying free Palestine, that they're not talking about genocide, and that they're not using words like Zionist. And this actually came up in legislative hearings. I didn't make it up. They said this in legislative hearings. Go ahead. We argued with the caucuses, the diversity caucuses, which are the Asian, the Black, the Latinx caucus, and we said, when are you all going to take back ethnic studies and quit letting the JLC control what goes in and out of ethnic studies? Didn't you create the bill? And so they said, okay, well, we're going to do something really important. We're going to pull ethnic studies out of the bill. So, oh, hooray, we pulled ethnic studies out of the bill. Next slide. So they pull ethnic studies of the bill. They think everybody in ethnic studies, they don't know the words, none of us are free till all of us are free. They think we're all going to be happy because ethnic studies is not a part of the bill. And we said, no, that's not what we meant. We didn't mean take out ethnic studies and let everybody else hang. Right? No. So they come up with the worst bill, and you'll get the language. Next slide. I'm going to go real quick now. Next slide. Okay. They write this intent language, right, where they write in the bill basically conflating the discussion about the genocide in Gaza to anti-Semitism. And so they developed this they use the ADL's version of the increase in anti-Semitism as an argument to go for this bill that's going to establish one person in the state of California that's going to be the anti-Semitic coordinator. And that person is going to be the one who looks at all the reports on all the teachers that have been reported for anti-Semitism. Right? It gives no clear rules about what things are considered discriminatory. They just say you can't have anything that's discriminatory. They establish that part of this new anti-Semitic learning environment means any teacher, right, who consciously creates a learning environment that is anti-Semitic could be subject to this reporting, and they base that on the Jewish experience. Now imagine the Indian American experience, the Chicano experience. There's no monolithic community. But this is in the bill. Right? Next one, real quick. So we fight. We said we are part of that fight. We're fighting, we're going, we're talking. And then they come up with another bill. Right? Another version of 715. All of this done sneakily, very last minute. We're looking for the language. What's the language like? We're meeting with people. Can you tell us what it looks like? And every step of the way, right before the hearing, then we see the language. And every step of the way, every single step of the way, including when it got out of the assembly, they keep saying, oh yeah, we know, it's messed up, it's flawed, it needs work. When every other bill that needs work, you say, okay, we're not going to pass it. It'll become a 2-year bill, we'll keep working on it. They did everything they could to pass this bill. Right? So, even though they agree that it's a bad bill, next one. So it just leaves me to think, and then I'm going to stop. Leaves me to think, what is it they're worried about? Right? And this is where we come in as a community and a collective and a movement in solidarity. They are worried that when we get to define what our curriculum is, what we want said about our people, what kind of curriculum we want to see our children taught, they want a way to define and control what goes into the ethnic studies curriculum. They don't want us to use words like settler colonialism. They don't want you to talk about the genocide in Gaza. They don't want you to talk about things that make them feel uncomfortable, and that's also in the bill, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. They want us to move ethnic studies away from the stories of oppressed, racialized communities in this country and our issues in this country and our connection, right? Our connection to movements of global solidarity, because that actually was in the first bill. That we could not discuss, we could only discuss ethnic studies as in the United States. As if all of us leave our relationship, right, or are here because of US imperialism and colonialism. Right? There's no way that we can leave that behind. None. Not a single member of the ethnic studies community. They know that ethnic studies exposes the power structure. They want us not to discuss settler colonialism. They want us not to discuss imperialism. And right now, the test is the discussion on Palestine. What if tomorrow it's Black Lives Matter? Right? What if it's tomorrow it's the exposure of the cruelty of the caste system? Right? What if tomorrow it's getting rid of ICE? It could be anything that they feel makes anyone feel uncomfortable. This is what is fearful about it. Right now, this is on the governor's law. Will it make a difference? Probably not. He's probably going to sign it. Right? Feelings are that he's going to sign it. And the minute it is signed, it'll be caught up in court. But the other thing that's going to happen is we're going to have such an increase in the reporting of classroom teachers for everything they do. Things like I wear a Free Palestine button outside of the classroom, right? Things like my students saw me wear a keffiyeh at a demonstration the other day. It doesn't even have to be what I teach in the classroom, because most of the incidents that have been reported have been for things you haven't done in the classroom. I was at a union meeting and I attended a union meeting on a presentation about Palestine. That is going to happen, and they're not going to stop. And we know they're not going to stop because we see it even with the bill not being signed. This week, every faculty member in the CSU received an email from the chancellor saying, we are being investigated for anti-Semitism. And if we are asked, we are going to turn over all your personal emails, right? All of your emails, everything the federal government asks, we are going to turn you in. Right? This is CSU faculty. Districts like Berkeley, San Francisco, and Santa Ana, the same people that have pushed back on ethnic studies in the statewide are the ones that are now pushing back against ethnic studies in San Francisco. Right? Where the superintendent pulled back on ethnic studies and then had to say, okay, no, you could have it. But you have to use this textbook now, which is a textbook from Utah. But Utah textbooks aren't anywhere near related to our curriculum. Berkeley has already been brought up before the new House of Un-American Activities in Washington, D.C. for its ethnic studies curriculum. This week, 2 teachers in Santa Ana called me because they had been reported by Michelle Steele. Y'all, she's a congresswoman from Orange County. She reported 2 teachers in Santa Ana for being anti-Semitic. Right, this week. This is what's going to happen tenfold when this bill passes. So we need to be ready. We need to be ready to work together. They're not going to end. They're going to keep coming after us. But hopefully together, since we're here together, and since I've been working with Lisa and Vivek, and I know that the issues that you are concerned with are critically important, hopefully from this meeting today we can come together to even think about how do we get lessons into the classroom on issues that you were talking about today. Right? How do students start learning about what you're talking about today? How do we create liberatory ethnic studies lessons that include the Indian American diaspora and the discussion about caste and oppression and all of those things. So, because we're not quitting, right? Ethnic studies for us was never about a class or a syllabus or a bill, right? It is the vehicle of struggle. It is a political project. And whether they come back with us with a bill or an email or tell us that they're going to look at our curriculum next week or 2 weeks from now, we're in this for the long haul. And hopefully we're all in this together.